Do you remember the good old days when we were wowed by the technology in MPO1 and we wondered what the future would hold? And this wonderful figure that had such a complicated transformation and blew our minds. You remember the days where the Carbots were simple transformation. It was a simpler time, and they still looked pretty good in both modes. Today I want to talk about the increasing complexity that we have with the Masterpiece line, both Takara and third party. I want to talk about why they're so complex, the specific reasons that they're getting so complex. I'm going to talk about the impact, both positive and negative, of this. And ultimately, I want to discuss the impact on the collector. Coming up. So there's no doubt that we have seen a massive shift since the MPO1 in the early days of Masterpiece. In fact, the Masterpiece line isn't even the same size scale and is definitely going for a different aesthetic these days. Some would argue that the complexity is caused by Takara. Some would argue the complexity is caused by third party. I would argue that it's both Takara and third party pushing to make them better, to make better looking figures in both modes, and that is the cause of the increased complexity of transformation and the increased complexity of these figures. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is the parts count. So when you look at the parts count of, say, Jabber, here, let's count those. 1, 2, no, we're not going to count those parts count. But when you look at that, the increased complexity and the way we have them look so good in both modes requires a ridiculously high increased level of parts count. Now, since they've made it a little easy for us, giving us the exact same characters over and over with Takara, I can't tell you that there were 31 parts put together to make the first Bumblebee, the MP21, and now there are 90 parts put together to make the Bumblebee version 2. I don't have those numbers, but when you do look at these figures, you can tell with the paneliness and the panel lines and all the extra parts and pieces that the newer ones have a much higher part count. Same thing goes for old school size Carbots to what we're getting now with the modern Carbot scale. I can't tell you how many parts were in one and now there's so many in another. Is it double? Is it triple? Is it only 20 additional parts? I can't tell you, but you can look at this and you can say the increased part count is part of it. And what goes along with the increased part count is the increased engineering and the time that it takes to create these figures. So when you look at, say, the Fans Toys Soar was an earlier Fans Toys version in the third party realm versus their Quietus, which is a relatively later figure, and you just know that the complexity of these figures and the transformation of these figures is much different and the part count is higher, and I still think they both look great in both modes. Even though Swoop was a much older figure with less part count versus Quietus, which is a newer figure, and a higher part count. They both look great in both modes, and I'm starting to wonder, could we get back to that? Yes, I do understand that certain characters would require a higher level of complexity than others. Here's looking at you, Rouge. And along with the increased part count does actually give us some new function even in alt mode with like opening doors, and then as you can see with the MP39 Sunstreaker, which that figure you can convert it to look like just a regular Lamborghini, or you can convert it to look like the cartoon mode, so you had both versions. So there are some pluses to all of this, but in the end, is this stuff really necessary? Is this stuff we're asking for? Is this stuff that we want? And when it comes to part count, I don't even want to know how many parts are involved in Road King or in Maverick. That's got to be a crazy high part count in those figures. But aside from complexity and long transformations and fear of breakage when transforming these ultra complex figures, comes another dark side of the complexity. the increased price. And I do have to commend third party for maintaining the price, keeping the price down versus Takara, and Takara letting it just run wild, run rampant, and go through the roof. So with this, it's the engineering, it's the parts. Wait, Takara never told us why the price doubled one year to the next. Well, the next thing I want to talk about is the fear of breakage. And I know with Jabber, a lot of people broke one specific part on Jabber, and I am actually very happy I didn't break mine, but it makes me extra ultra cautious when I do my transformation, and we start to wonder, is this why most people don't transform their Transformers? I did a very unscientific study in my comment section in several of my videos asking if you transform your Transformers, and unanimously I got 70% of my viewers say they don't transform them. They get them into the robot mode and they leave them in the robot mode, and only about 30% transform them actively, like for fun or occasionally. And this is why. Now, I've had this discussion come up, and it really was an interesting discussion. I probably should have made an entire video just about it, but people say that they didn't transform their figures when they sell them as a huge selling point, and I gotta tell you, when I see that, I'm like, oh, I'm kind of excited. I get like relatively new figure, it was only on a shelf, and it was never transformed. But a point was brought up most recently, talking about what if there was a defect or a QC error or an issue or a missing pin or something wrong with it, and it gets sold not knowing there was something wrong with it. A couple of people actually were saying that they like to know it's been transformed at least once, so that if there was something wrong with it, it would have been brought to light. And now that was a very interesting point that was brought up, and it got me thinking. There have been a record number of reports, in my opinion, of Teslas breaking or being broken or showing up as a broken figure. In fact, there's some on eBay right now that are broken, and everybody, whether it's broken or not, still expects to sell theirs for $500 for whatever reason. But it's one of those things that maybe you wouldn't have known if you didn't transform it, that there was a breakage or cracked plastic or something going on in there. And that got me thinking. I kind of messed with mine a bit, partially transformed it just to see if I had any problems with mine, because I started seeing this over and over and over, people telling me in my comment section, and so that really was something that maybe if it wasn't transformed ever, maybe that's not as good of a thing as I used to think. Would love to hear everyone chime in the comments about that one. So I start to wonder and I start to question, will we get back to a more simplistic design? Simplistic transformations to where they still look good in both modes, but they're not overly complex and overly panelized and full of, well, panels and panel lines. Some people actually like that, and some people like that. I don't like the panels so much. Now, Transform Element actually put out a pretty clean looking Optimus Prime. I can't say that the transformation is smooth and easy. It's a bit of a challenge, but the figure looks clean in both modes and doesn't look ultra panely. Now, looking at, they're about to put out their Sphinx. Well, they don't call it Sphinx. It's Mirage. Sphinx. Anyway, their Mirage looks way cleaner than Sphinx, and it looks like an excellent looking figure, and I'm starting to wonder, how will the transformation be on this? Will it be a simple transformation? Will it be ultra complex? Starting to wonder, are they going to go in that direction of Takara and all of the extra steps to get there? Will they go the route of Fans Toys, where it's really frustrating to get there? Or will they go the route of Bad Cube and be kind of like, why even bother? Which brings me to the whole main point. What direction do we go from here? Will they continue having a simplistic look to them with an extremely complex transformation? That extremely complex transformation is derived from a ridiculously high part count, a large number of steps to get there, and in some cases intuitive, in some cases not at all. What direction are we going from here? One thing that is for sure, Everyone who collects these wants to know they transform. Whether they transform them or not, they want to know that the figure can transform. The non-transforming figures don't generally catch on that well, although the really high-end ones seem to be extremely popular. If you put out a reasonably priced non-transforming figure such as this Devastator, it doesn't really catch on. Flames Toys can corner that market on the non-transforming figures, but as for everything else, it must transform. So what do you guys think about this? Do you think that they're getting too complex, too overly complicated? Do you transform yours every single day, once a week, never at all, only if it requires it out of the box? Have they just become too complex? Do they need to be simpler? Hey, are there people out there that want to see them even more complex? Like, subscribe, Titanium Hanger out.